I will be moderating this session, and I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to meet you all. As we better understand how closely human health is connected to the health of our planet, endorsing discipline also needs to broaden its perspective to include planetary health. This is important not only for advancing nursing knowledge, but also for preparing future nurses to respond to environmental and health challenges. Bringing planetary health into research and education is now an essential step toward creating more sustainable and fairer system. Today, we are joined by two well-known nurses, researchers, and educators, along with one nursing student. Together, they will share perspectives on both research and education. After each 10 to 15 minutes presentation, we will continue with the panel discussion. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to write them in the chat. Okay, now I would like to introduce our first panelist, Professor Sumi Ikizaki. Please join me in welcoming her. Professor Sumi Ikizaki is she's professor and vice dean at the Graduate School of Nursing in Chiba University. Her expertise lies in nursing management and gerontological nursing. Her research focuses on end-of-life care in home and long-term care settings, the development and evaluation of community-based integrated care system, and advancement of evidence-based practice and quality improvement grounded in nursing leadership. She is particularly committed to strengthening professional autonomy, organizational effectiveness, and the leadership capacity among nurses in the context of rapidly aging societies. Please welcome her.
Good morning or good evening, everyone. My name is Sumi Ikizaki, and I'm a professor at Chiba University in Japan. It's a great honor for me to have this opportunity to speak with you today. The title of my presentation is Current Status of Nursing Education and Research in Japan. In the limited available today, I will talk about three topics. First, environmental policy and healthcare in Japan. Here, I will briefly explain the Japanese background and context. Second, the three repeals in Japan. In this part, I will focus on disposable diapers as one example of reduce, reuse, and recycle. Third, nurses' awareness and education on climate change and health. Here, I will introduce some emerging educational and research efforts in Japan. First, let me begin the background of environmental policy and healthcare in Japan. Japan's environmental policy has evolved significantly over the past 2 decades. A major turning point was the Kyoto Protocol, which was adopted in Kyoto, Japan in 1997. Under the United Nations Framework Conversation Climate Changes, or UNFCCC. The following year, Japan enacted the Act on Promotion of Global Warming Countermeasures, which became a key legal framework for environmental policy in this country. Then, after the Paris Agreement in 2015, Japan, like many other countries, began moving forward with time-bound targets. These targets are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 46% from fiscal year 2013 levels by 2030, and to achieve net zero emission by 2050. This slide shows Japan's progress towards those goals. The red line represents the path towards net zero emission by 2050. At the bottom of the graph, the green area indicates the proportion of carbon dioxide that is absorbed bottom of the graph, absorbed or refused without being emitted. According to the latest data, Japan had achieved a 27% reduction by fiscal year 2023. At first glance, this may look very encouraging. However, the real question is whether Japan can continue reducing emission at this pace unless we broaden awareness among industries and citizens who have not previously paid much attention to carbon emissions, and unless we implement practical countermeasures. I believe it will be difficult to maintain this momentum. Uh, sorry. Sorry.
I'm just screen sharing your slides because they weren't showing from
Sorry.
your screen,
Sorry.
Sumi. Sorry.
Sorry.
So just bear
Sorry.
with us. There we go.
Can I off the slide share?
Yep. I'll just move them on to
Thank you.
was that the slide?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Next slide, please.
Yep.
Okay. There's the next slide.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. One of these sectors has not paid enough attention to carbon emissions is healthcare. The healthcare sector accounts for 50.5% of global CO2 gas emissions. However, only a limited number of health researchers in Japan are aware of the fact. Even within the global healthcare sector, Japan is estimated to rank fourth in emissions. So, why are emissions from healthcare in Japan so high? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. The slide summarizes some of the factors that increase healthcare demand in Japan. First, there is a population aging. People aged 65 and older account for about 30% of the total population. As a result, non-communicable diseases are increasing, and many people require long-term medication, treatment, and care. In addition, Japan's healthcare delivery system includes a relatively large number of hospitals and beds per capita. This suggests that the country may have an infrastructure that consumers more resources than necessary. Japan also has a very high frequency of outpatient visits, more than double the OECD average. This also contributes to the emissions through transportation. I believe these realities need to be shared much more widely among healthcare educators and practitioners in Japan. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. This slide shows municipal waste per capita by treatment type. Japan appears at top. One notable feature is that the proportion of waste that is recycled, shown in green, is relatively low. While nearly 80% is treated by incineration, in Japan, waste is commonly disposed by burning it, which of course produces carbon dioxide. By contrast, Korea has a much higher recycling rate. This difference is very striking, and I think it gives us an important point of comparison in this session. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to content this issue more directly to healthcare. The topic is disposable diapers. In Japan, adult diapers now outnumber baby diapers. Used disposable diapers are generally treated as municipal solid waste, which means they are incinerated. Their share in the waste stream is increasing, and this is becoming a serious issue for municipalities that manage incineration facilities. Of course, when wet diapers are burned, more energy is required and more carbon dioxide is emitted. Next slide, please. In response to this issue, Japan introduced the guidelines for the recycling of the used diapers in 2019. Instead of simply incinerating used diapers, recycling them can reduce environmental impact. In fact, recycling 1 ton of used disposable diapers reduces carbon dioxide emission by 0.54 to 0.5 tons. Next slide, please. There are several recycling methods. Used diapers can be recycled into new diapers, into refuse paper, plastic, fuel, or RPF, and even into reproduce such as covered boxes. Next slide, please. Following back is the slide, please. Following these guidelines, many municipalities, various sites across Japan have been working on diaper collection and recycling. On the left, sir, you can see the dedicated collection box installed in facility. The middle photo shows used diapers being collected from such a box. The photo on the right shows equipment in a specialized plant where used diapers are processed through water circulation, separation, and ozone treatment. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to turn to nurses. I personally became interested in the issue of the diaper recycling in 2019 when I first read about it in my local newspaper. However, when I recently discussed this topic with my colleagues, none of them, despite being nursing researchers, knew about it. This gap in awareness is, I think, very important. Next slide, please. I believe nurses should pay much more attention to the waste generated through the care they provide. We need to ask why such a large volume of diaper waste is produced and whether there may be care-related issues behind it. For example, using oversized diapers or changing them routinely when it is not necessary can increase waste. More fundamentally, encouraging toileting independence and minimizing diaper use whenever possible is also part of professional nursing care. Nurses are both users and disposers of many kinds of single-use medical supplies in healthcare settings. Balancing infection control and patient safety with appropriate use of resource is, in my view, an important ethical issue in nursing from a global perspective. Next slide, please. As nursing educators and researchers, we need to expand efforts that help nurses recognize their role in reducing greenhouse gas pollution. To do that, it's important to use familiar and practical examples so that nurses can better understand how the everybody practice is connected to environmental impact. Next slide, please. This slide presents findings from master's study supervised by me. The researcher conducted a questionnaire survey of operating room nurses who work in one of the most resource-intensive settings in the hospital. More than 80% of respondents agreed with the statement. Reducing medical waste is one of the responsibilities of healthcare professionals. On the other hand, about one quarter also agreed with the statement. Environmental issues need not be considered because the primary goal of a healthcare professional is to provide safe and optimal patient care. These responses reflect the differences in personal values and perspectives. I believe education is needed to build a more consistent understanding and to empower nurses in this area. Next slide, please. Dr. Schenk and colleagues in the United States have summarized concrete actions that nurses can take. I believe that the first step toward implementation is for nurses to develop a clear image of what they themselves can decide and improve within healthcare systems. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. Next, we released the revised model curriculum for nursing education on March 17th, 2025. The revised curriculum states understands the interrelationship among the global empowerment, the social environment, and human health that is the perspective of planetary health. This appears to be the first express use of the term planetary health in nursing education. In Japan, the care of education and the research has just started. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sumi. Dr. Sumi is a
Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Lee. You're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sumi Ikezaki. Yeah, it was very insightful presentation that we can learn current situation or issues in Japanese healthcare settings and also nurses' roles and reducing the waste in addition to others. Now that we are moving on to next speaker. Miss Hyewon Nam, she's a junior nursing student in Yonsei University College of Nursing. She previously served as the president of NTG, an International Health Academy student organization at the Yonsei University College of Nursing. I learned particularly she got interested in the planetary health after attending the International Council of Nurses Congress in Helsinki last year. So now we will hear from her. Hyewon, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Lee, for your kind introduction. And I will share my slide. Just a moment, please. Can everyone see my slide right now? Okay. So, hello everyone. I'm Hyewon Nam, an undergraduate student at Yonsei University College of Nursing. First of all, it's a great honor to speak in front of such distinguished guests. I'm very excited. I'm a bit nervous to share my perspective as a nursing student with all of you today. I would like to share my presentation, Planetary Health and the Future of Nursing, a nursing student's perspective from an ICN session. The table of contents is over here. Currently, our planet is facing an unprecedented climate crisis. According to the latest statistics from the World Health Organization, WHO, between 2030 and 2050, climate change is predicted to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths each year due to malnutrition, malaria, and heat stress, and etc. This threat is not just a story from a faraway land. In South Korea, we can see the severity through the Korea Climate Change Assessment Report 2025, published by the Ministry of Environment and the Korea Meteorological ecological administration. According to the report, warming on the Korean Peninsula is accelerating. Extreme weather events like heat waves and heavy rains are becoming more frequent and intense, directly threatening the lives and health of our citizens. Personally, as I watched the record-breaking heat and the rising number of patients with heat-related illnesses every year, I began to ask myself, as a future nurse, what should I do? According to with me and colleagues, planetary health is defined as achieving the highest attainable standard of health, well-being, and equity worldwide within political, economic, and social systems that respect the limits of Earth's ecosystems. In this context, we have reached an era where human health can no longer be guaranteed by individual lifestyle habits or medical systems alone. We are now faced with the urgent task of expanding the paradigm of public health to a global scale. In other words, planetary health emphasizes that human health is interdependent with the Earth's natural systems. To sustain human civilization amidst the global emergency of the climate crisis, it is essential to manage health wisely within the Earth's ecological limits. According to various research papers, the early nursing profession understood the environment narrowly as the immediate surroundings of a patient. Therefore, nurses were less involved in roles that could change the environment itself. While the concept of the relationship between nurses and planetary health is still developing, health advocacy is directly linked to climate advocacy. Because nurses hold social justice and health promotion as their professional duties. As a result, there is a growing recognition that nurses must actively participate in preventing and mitigating health problems caused by climate change. We need an expanded nurse-environmental relationship that includes social and global environments. I became deeply interested in this topic after participating in ICN Congress 2025. As a nursing student, I wanted to go beyond what I learned in school and experience various fields of nursing while hearing the voices of global experts. The conference was held under the theme, Nursing Power to Change the World. As an undergraduate, it was sometimes difficult to perfectly understand the in-depth research. However, the passion at the scene provided me with a fresh academic stimulus outside of the classroom. Among the various conference sessions, the topic that caught my eye was planetary health. I heard global experts emphasize the importance of awareness and saw real research results regarding nurses' current perceptions of the Earth's health. The study that stayed with me the most was about the nurses' awareness and practice regarding the climate crisis. The results showed that while most nurses recognize a close link between the climate crisis and their professional field, they do not receive systemic training or perform preventive actions in practice. This made me realize how important it is for nursing students to recognize before becoming clinical nurses that the climate crisis and nursing are closely connected. And actually, I really wanted to share the actual photos of the research results from the ICN Congress, but unfortunately, copyright issues stood in my way. So I published produced these images with Gemini. I hope it effectively captured the essence of what I learned. In response, my student club at Yonsei Nursing, NTG, Nursing to be Global Leaders, focused on the changes in the health environment caused by the global crisis. We conducted a study on planetary health and how the role of nurses should evolve. We concluded that the role of nurses must be expanded. Future nurses should consider environmental risk factors alongside psychological signs during clinical decision making. We must also reflect environmental elements in our nursing care plans. To be specific, we discussed how this shift works in a real-world scenario, such as heat waves and cardiovascular strain. Imagine an elderly patient in the ER with a high heart rate during a heat wave. A traditional nurse might only look for internal causes like dehydration. However, a nurse practicing planetary health would check the local heat index and ask, do you have a working fan or AC at home? By integrating these environmental risk factors, the nurse identifies heat stress as the root cause. The intervention then expands to include not just medical treatment, but also environmental education, such as guiding the patient to local cooling centers to prevent recurrence. Furthermore, hospitals must structurally establish sustainable carbon emission standards, and nurses must have the competency to ensure these standards work in the field. We presented this academic insight at the Yale Yonsei NTG Global Forum on March 12, 2026. NTG plans to conduct follow research about innovation strategy for the healthcare system on May 1st. We also regularly attend weekly Monday seminars at the Yonsei Planetary Health Research Center to study the latest global trends. This is a unique space where undergraduate students and graduate researchers come together to bridge the gap between theory and practice. These activities are helping us build the sustainability skill we need as future professionals. Currently, research in planetary health nursing is in its early stages. We realize that we need more than just a simple expansion of existing nursing theories. We need a fundamental shift that recognizes the interconnectedness of all living systems. To guide this shift, we adopted the RIP framework proposed by Leclerc and Potter in 2022. The RIP framework goes to four domains. First is the research. Research means that identifying the link between a human activity and health outcome. And second, education means that integrating planetary health into the curriculum to build climate-ready nurses. And third, advocacy means that leading policies for environmental justice and vulnerable populations. And P means that practice and specifies into two domains. First is the individual practice, and second is the population health practice. And first, individual practice focuses on immediate clinical settings, such as leading green teams in hospitals to reduce waste and increase energy efficiency. And second, population health practice focuses on large-scale systems, policies, and social justice. Ultimately, all of our activities, both the NTG studies and our weekly Monday seminars, move forward with this RIP perspective in mind. We believe that multidisciplinary cooperation and improving awareness through undergraduate education and practical efforts to reduce waste are essential foundations. This experience allows nurses to grow beyond being simple healthcare providers to becoming the leaders needed in this era of climate crisis. Among this, I believe education is most critical. Many nurses want to help but don't know how. My peers and I agree that planetary health should be taught in first or second year when students learn the basics and professional values, rather than third or fourth year when students are busy with clinical practice and exams. It should start as an elective course to create a space for interested students together. The existence of the course itself will spark new interests. This is an essential process for building sustainability competency in future nursing experts. In conclusion, it is vital for nursing students to care about planetary health. Future nurses must play a key role on the front lines of solving climate-related health issues. Therefore, I believe planetary health should be actively included in the undergraduate curriculum. While it is currently treated as a one-time lecture or a small part of community nursing, it should eventually be organized as an independent subject. Nurses are in a position to encounter the impact of the environment on health first in the community. If we clearly understand and learn the practice from our student days, we will be able to protect our patients and our environment as professional nurses. As a student, I will integrate planetary health as a natural part of nursing, sustaining my commitment through continuous engagement and practice. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
For allowing us to learn the student perspective and actions regarding planetary health. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Professor Jerina Loughney-Tompkins. Professor Jerina Loughney-Tompkins is a climate and health researcher and educator at Monash University. Her work focuses on strengthening climate-resilient maternal and child health system, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. She examines how climate change and natural disasters disrupt care for pregnant women, newborns, and young children. Please join me welcoming her. Serena,
Thank you, Professor Lee.
please go ahead.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation to present this evening on our work in Asia Pacific. I do apologize, I have a cold, so my voice is going to sound a little bit strange, but let's just see if we can go through the next 15 minutes to share our initiative in this space. So let me just see if I can, lovely. So just before I start, I would like to acknowledge that Monash University and I myself live on the lands of Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people who are in the Kulin Nations. And I take my time to pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Of course, I pay the respect to Indigenous populations around the world and and to all of you, of course, for coming this evening and sparing out your time for this presentation. Now, many of you will know that the planet is facing three significant crises. This is the biodiversity loss, the pollution that we've heard about earlier, and of course, climate change. And in combination, these three crises are basically impacting everything that is occurring within our socio-ecological systems. Any pollution to air, land, fresh water, or oceans, as well as the destruction of the living world around us, means that there is a planetary impact that in many cases is becoming irreversible. What we also know from the literature is that through the impacts on the human health and socio-ecological systems, we're also seeing that the greater the loss to planetary health, the greater the loss to human health as well. And the question for us really is, what needs to change and how do we avoid many of the consequences that are being predicted in the coming years, particularly since we are not reducing our carbon emissions as much as we should, and we are certainly not doing as well on preserving biodiversity as well as reducing our pollution. At this point in time, every step matters, so it really is important that we all understand that we actually have the tools and the means to do what we need to do, and perhaps sharing our initiative here with you tonight might give you an idea of what you can do to start where you are with what you've got. So most people, when they think about climate change, they always think about natural hazard disasters. We talk about the storms and the floods and the bushfires. And most of the time when we talk about it in context of nursing, we talk about disaster nursing and every nurse being a disaster nurse. But I actually think that it's really important that we distinguish that climate change is not just disaster nursing, it is actually far more beyond that. So if you are looking at the for example, the impacts in general, you know that anything that comes through climate change, which is that overall heating of the planet, we are looking at the environmental impact. So, in addition to having the increased global temperatures that are leading to increased frequency, duration, intensity of natural hazard disasters, we are actually also seeing sea level rise and a warming ocean. And these changes that are occurring in terms of melting glaciers and ice sheets. So really that connection between climate change and planetary health and what's occurring at that level means that both the human health and the ecosystem around us is suffering. So in the ecosystem sense, we are looking at the habitat loss, the species extinctions that is occurring incredibly rapidly at this stage, but also actual disruptions of the animal and plant life cycle, particularly in terms of, for example, plants that are expected to grow faster as the carbon emission increase, but then also produce a lot of pollen that will then lead to increase in asthma and allergies overall. Now, in terms of human health, yes, there are health effects across multiple systems in anatomy and physiology, but there are other layered components in there. How we are able to protect our health depends on our economic capacity, our food security and water security, but also what's happening in terms of economic and social disruptions. And indeed, current geopolitical instability that we are seeing in the world are highlighting these impacts even more. And of course, having the impact that sort of has a feedback loop that impacts both what occurs at that health level, but also in terms of that socio-economic perspective. And naturally, as our planet loses regions to climate change through drought, water security, for example, we will see global displacements of populations around the world. Now, in many aspects, every population will be vulnerable in different ways. But for maternal and child health, what we are looking at is that vulnerability of physiology associated with pregnancy. And of course, when we have a newborn and an infant and a child under the age of 5, we are looking at high dependency on care, but we're also looking at high dependency of both the mother and the child on the society and the ecological support that exists around them. So as we are seeing all these changes that are occurring in extreme temperatures and rising sea levels, we're also seeing impacts on the threats to livelihood and human rights that are actually then framing how we are able to respond to many of these issues that are rising. In addition to the population health, we are also seeing the pressures on the healthcare system. And what that actually means is that the more we see the impacts of climate change, the more stress we'll see both on the system in terms of being able to cater for the existing population requiring services, of course, to provide additional services for those impacted by natural hazard disasters, but then also the fact that all these hospitals and health centers, their own infrastructure is being impacted by these events. And if you are looking at something that is needing to deal with increased frequency and duration and intensity of these events, you also have to wonder, well, how resilient are these structures and how resilient is the healthcare workforce to support these components in the future? So indeed, as my young colleague suggested earlier, Nurse Nam or future Nurse Nam, there is indeed a requirement for the healthcare workforce to be trained and to be educated to step up. And this also includes not only nurses, but also our colleagues in midwifery, as well as across the medicine and allied health. So to be able to do this collectively as a society, the World Health Organization has actually prioritized and called for action in terms of protecting maternal and child health from the impacts of climate change. And in my own journey, which started about 4 years ago, I got onto this stage because of the lived experiences with the 2019-2020 Australian bushfires and realizing the limitations of the healthcare system, but also limitations of my own knowledge and ability to actually manage circumstances that occurred at that time. And perhaps one of the observations that I think we really need to be unpacking more significantly is that this whole session does focus a lot on empowering nurses and midwives, but actually we're asking a lot from our communities and particularly women to actually respond to the risks that they're not equipped to either understand or anticipate. So even in the latest call, in terms of giving more, it's always asked of women to give more. And at some point in time, we need to be able to understand what does that actually mean in the context of climate and health. So our way of managing the impact of maternal and child health and trying to understand what our ability is to help here is actually through developing a maternal and child health climate adaptation resilience network. And this network is actually across Asia Pacific, and it started off with 5 members, which was Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Fiji, and Bangladesh. And really, we came together because we thought that for the maternal and child health researchers in this part of the world, there was very low visibility. And we knew from research that maternal and child health, in particularly in context of climate change and planetary health, is very poorly researched. So we really wanted to come together with one mission to actually improve climate resilience of maternal and child health and the services that deliver care for this population by actually understanding what are the vulnerabilities experienced and how does the community think that these vulnerabilities can be addressed. And more importantly, we wanted to put women and adolescent girls at the center of all the planning and decision making, because at the end of the day, this is impacting them the most. And finally, we wanted this particular network to serve as a source of evidence-based information and interventions that people around Asia Pacific could adopt in their own settings. Now, for those of you who are wondering what I mean by maternal health, we are very much going with the WHO definition, referring to the health of women during pregnancy, childbirth, and that postnatal period. But in this case, we've put it up to 5 years of age that actually corresponds together with the child health definition, which is also taken from the World Health Organization. And in many of our countries, the age of 5 actually corresponds to the ability to provide health service that is mostly sponsored by the governments, where there is an ongoing care for both the mother and the child to ensure that healthy first 1,000 days of life. And the reason why we looked at climate resilience and adaptation is because we know that with our inability to yet meet the 1.5 degrees and the real threat of actually moving towards 2 degrees and higher, we need to understand what does the climate future look like for this population, but also others. And what does this adaptation actually look like? And, if we are going to be resilient and be able to recover or mitigate our vulnerability to any climate-related shock, well, what does that actually look like 10, 15, 30, 50 years from now? And in terms of this adaptation, if we are having losses of ecological, social, and economic systems, what does this then look like in terms of the future maternal and child health? So really, what are all these processes that we need to be thinking about in order to support healthy childhood? Why do we focus on Asia Pacific region alone? Well, it's actually a region that is home to about 8 out of 10 countries most exposed to climate-related impacts and natural hazard disasters in particular. And we know from climate science that Asia is warming more quickly than the global average. And in the Pacific Islands in particular, half of the country's built-in infrastructure is actually located in coastal areas, meaning that there is a huge risk to that healthcare service and system from the rising sea levels. So really the pressures on being able to support the health of future generations very much depends on the ability to address many of these issues as they are arising. Now, we actually gathered a team of people together across our 5 nations, and we really worked together for almost a year to actually come up with the core values of what we wanted to do. And indeed, we are guided by the equity, which means that we place the needs and rights and voices of pregnant women, new mothers, and children at the center of everything we do. In terms of collaboration, the aim of our network is not just to undertake research, but to actually act as a connecting point. That means that if somebody in Japan, for example, wants to work with somebody in Indonesia, they can come to our network and they should be able to contact the researcher directly and initiate that collaboration. We really support all our members to actually look at the mapping of the evidence and then translating that knowledge into their local practice and policy change, whatever that may look like in terms of cultural appropriateness. And in terms of innovation, we are actually pulling from all the resources to actually really build on that cultural diversity and different ways of knowing and being to be able to responsibly and sustainably strengthen maternal and child health, climate adaptation, resilience. The other thing I really think is important is that we don't assign all the responsibility to women and adolescent girls in order to actually protect maternal and child health. We believe this is a community responsibility, and in our research, we involve elders as well as partners and carers of the pregnant women, and of course, carers of the young children. So that means that we have perspectives from everybody that is interested in this space to come and actually provide input into our research. Like everybody else has shared the ideas here today, we are very much looking at mapping vulnerabilities, but very much from the community point of view. We are avoiding the top-down level approach, meaning that, we may think what they need, but actually when you talk to communities, you find out that the priorities are very different. Because the climate change is such a distant, a sense for many in the community, most people actually focus on the immediate components. Therefore, when you teach about adaptation and resilience and mitigation, you really have to be careful how you put that language together so that the people understand the priority of being able to put those interventions ahead of, for example, something else. Now, the important part as well is that we talk to community leaders, but also the government and policymakers to try and advance whatever this research might bring in terms of improvements. And finally, because we sit in digital health as well, one of our ambitions is to build minimum data sets and sort of provide digital health solutions that are very much in environmental sustainability component as well. Now, this is our very brief team. Again, mentioning that we've got members in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Fiji, and Bangladesh. And recently, we've had colleagues from Philippines joining us in. And I think Singapore will be joining in the future as well. We are a growing network, but I think fundamentally, we are all driven by the same value, and that is to actually make a difference to people in low resource settings. How do we do that? Well, we actually look at the hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, very much adopting the IPCC framework in what this actually looks like. And again, trying to use a socio-ecological model, which I'll talk about very briefly, to be able to pull these things together. So we don't just look at physiological health and mental health, but rather really putting people into their geographical locations and understanding the pressures there, so that we actually then know, what does this look like in terms of gender lens? What does it look like in terms of access to care? Particularly because models of care are very different across different populations. And of course, when you're thinking about that gender lens, we need to be thinking about what is possible for a mother at the individual level. How is that relational to a family? And then, of course, the community and the government and the hospital system. And then naturally, what does this mean? Because in terms of climate change, because each geography will have different challenges. So in some instances, you'll have a challenge of sea rising level, and the priority will be floods rather than heat waves. And we really need to be careful about this, because while we emphasize heat waves a lot, when you talk to communities, for some of them, priority is actually flood. So being able to prioritize that type of research and, of course, putting resources where it's needed becomes very important. Now, the organizers have asked me also to talk about solution and what you can do. One of the things that you can all do is to share what you know already. For those of you who are advanced nursing practice or even students, think about what you can share with colleagues in low resource settings. In my case, I share my research expertise. I train other researchers. For example, these are my colleagues in Indonesia. And I also help them set up research frameworks around any initiatives, including education, to document what's actually being done. At this table, that we are all nurses, we are all leading this program, and we all want to make a difference to our communities which we serve. The other component we have to realize, particularly for those of us sitting in global north, is that we actually need to make a space for another. As an editor of some of the journals that I work for, what I see often is that you've got a global north person being a first author, even though the work was done in, for example, a very low resource country. The local researchers may or may not be on that paper. So I really challenge all of you to think very carefully about how you are acknowledging the researchers in local countries, and what do you actually do to ensure that they have the ability and capacity and knowledge to be part of this work, and how are you actually building that local research capacity or educator capacity to be able to actually provide what they need. And most importantly, ask the community what they actually need when you want to design any intervention. In our Fiji consultations, for example, the community really wanted to know about the nutrition and why is it that when the sea level rises, they lose so much land and therefore nutrition is becoming a problem. And then in Indonesia, for example, where we worked in Pekalongan, we have, again, sea level rise. But in this instance, we actually have issues that the farming is no longer possible. And the aquaculture that is actually being used to sort of replace the rice fields farming is being sort of implemented in a way that may not acknowledge the pressures of the climate change and the geography. So all these components need to be considered when you're designing any environmentally sustainable solution that this community wants and needs, rather than going in there with your own perceptions. And it is something that you learn as a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but it takes, time, effort, and trust to build these relationships. But once you actually have them, you will find out that as a nurse, you are both respected and valued and heard and seen. And people will actually hear what you have to say in terms of protecting health. Finally, one thing that you also can think about is the environmental sustainability of digital health. A lot of people are very quick to jump on the AI bandwagon. AI produces a huge carbon footprint, both in terms of data centers and the simple fact that it's actually mining the data that we use. And really, many of these solutions simply will not work in low resource settings where there might be a one phone with a very limited coverage in a very impoverished settings. So if you are looking at digital health solutions in these communities, please ask the community what would work and how it would work. And don't be afraid of sitting down and designing these solutions with the community. You will find out that the trusted messengers are not always healthcare professionals. It's actually community leaders. And you can only know that if you ask. So overall, there's lots there that you can do from where you are in your nursing position. You can support others and be supported at the same time. But more importantly, don't be afraid to share what you know in terms of building that knowledge overall. So that brings me to the end of our initiative of the MCH I'm always happy to hear from anybody who is interested in our work and to connect you with our colleagues. We hope to grow a bit more, but more importantly, the work that we do for maternal and child health, we hope will serve the communities as they want in the geography that they live in. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Serena. It was so the wonderful presentation. Particularly, I was so impressed. Your extensive research work in collaboration with the global partners through the MCS Care Network. Yeah, so far we have heard 3 excellent presentations. I think because of time limit, we don't have the time to discuss each other, right? Okay, in summary, each speaker brought very thoughtful and professional insight, making this is a truly the valuable session. As we come to the end of this session, I would like to briefly highlight a few key takeaways. Integrating planetary health into nursing education is essential to prepare future nurses to address complex environmental health challenges through prevention, advocacy, and sustainable practice. In nursing research, it provides important opportunities to build evidence on environmental impact, develop effective interventions, and inform the policy and practice. Most importantly, awareness is not enough. Awareness alone is not enough. Action is needed. This means embedding planetary health into curriculum, advancing interdisciplinary research, adopting sustainable practice, and strengthening collaboration. Through this effort, nursing can play a vital role in promoting the healthier future for both people and the planet. Through this session, I believe we all in the Western Pacific region shared our perspectives on planetary health and reflected together on future directions. As planetary health is still an emerging area within nursing, all of us gathered here today that may be among those leading its practice and development. So once again, I would like to sincerely thank you for 3 speakers three speakers for their insightful contributions, and also thank all of you for your participation. So we will conclude here, and we kindly invite everyone to move on to the next session. Thank you.